Welcome to the Pagan Place podcast. Warning, Steve and Jaclyn are on about some bullshit right now. Let's start the show.
This time around, we're joined by the infamous Steve Hayes, host of Podcast of the Universe. We decided to give this episode a little bit of a PO2 flair to make Steve feel it right at home, so we have some topics to be covered. And of course, you'll get some great tunes too. So sit back, sip your poison, and enjoy the ride. I'm Jaclyn Capson, and this is the Pagan Place Podcast. So I'm joined this time by Steve Hayes, who's host of PO2 from Motu, and then Podcast of the Universe. Which would you say is your more widely listened one?
Oh, He-Man for sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of figured it would be.
Which is funny because when I started it, it was just to make a podcast and find my way through it and figure out what I was doing because I had no idea. And I wanted to make something in a little obscure part of the internet. And every year my brother gives me He-Man themed items. So I had all of this material and I thought I'll use all of this material. I'll make a show. I began recording just with my phone and the Anchor app, which is free. Then I bought a cheap $20 mic and a microphone stand that was also $20. So then I had invested $40. You turned me on to Audacity. Our friend Graham mentioned the Yeti mic. I like your setup, but I'm not there yet for editing.
Yeah.
So I got the USB Yeti mic because that's where I was comfortable with at the time.
Right.
So right now, if I put an episode of Podcast of the Universe for Masters of the Universe, I get 93 clicks within like a month. And then for this new episode, it depends on the subject matter. And I try not to pay attention to the numbers because I want to do topics that I'm interested in. So there are some topics that will get more clicks, but maybe one that I had a lot of fun doing will get 20. But yeah, the Masters of the Universe podcast is definitely more popular. And I have probably 102 or 103 of those out now. So like I was flying through them 4 or 5 a week sometimes just because I wanted to get my reps in and rush through it. Yeah. So I spend enough time staring at the TV or doing some other, something that's not the best use of my time. So I thought it was good to try something and, make a project out of it. Same thing as I enjoy painting, but I'm an awful painter. I'll have an awful painting. Like I have like a closet just filled with things that like didn't turn out the way I wanted to, but when I did them, I really enjoyed it. And there's something I can take from that painting when I do another one.
Yeah.
I have like a closet of shame of all these paintings that will never go on any wall. For me, I like pushing myself to do something that I'm not comfortable or something that's not, doesn't come easy to me. So that's kind of like what the podcast is too. And also it's a fun way to get silly ideas out and share that. So, yeah.
Right. And that was kind of my goal with the podcast too when I started, is to encourage people that might not be doing a lot of things, or they might kind of be closet guitar players or closet painters or whatever, to encourage them just to keep doing it. And then, if you want to make something of it, eventually you'll be able to if you do it enough. And then that's pretty much how I started out with. So for this episode, I wanted to kind of do a mix of my typical format when I have guests and your format. For those who haven't heard Podcast of the Universe, it's much more informative, topic heavy than mine is. Usually you pick one topic, go through it. Well, why don't you just tell us about the format of your...
Sure. So every once in a while I'll come across a topic and I'll invest a lot of time into watching YouTube videos, reading books, going down internet rabbit holes, and entertaining myself. It might be something where I had a really strange episode. I think as time goes on, it won't be that strange when you look at the bigger picture. But I did an episode on fetishes that you could put on YouTube, like PG-friendly fetishes.
Yeah.
So something as simple as a woman getting stuck in a car in the mud and she keeps hitting the gas pedal. Like there's a huge market for that where people pay money for those videos. And you could show them on YouTube because they're not graphic. So I'm not into that. But like the idea is interesting that there's like all of these little subcultures, like genres on on YouTube, and I thought that was, and I didn't want to like kink shame anyone either, but I was like, this is different, and I thought it was a fun episode. There's an episode that'll be out. I believe it was you that had mentioned pre-1970s sex dolls. Was that you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually started looking into that, and I found like a bunch of cool stuff. I was like, yeah, that's an episode.
Funny you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I chose for today's topic.
I'll go home and cross that off.
I've done some no, you should still do it because you'll do a much better job than I did. No doubt. I'll you can take my notes with you when you go.
All right.
So that being said, you'll take a topic, you'll run with it, but it's always a varied topic. It's completely different.
Right.
180 every time you do an episode.
Right. For Christmas, I had ordered for my brother, who's has similar interest to me. He had always wanted the Jonestown recordings, like on vinyl. It's pretty grim 45 minutes, but it's something that he had wanted, and I found one on eBay, and it was in perfect shape. It was a 1987 pressing, which I think was the second run for them. And I bought it for him, and they only had one. And it came in the mail, and I looked at it, and I was like, man, I want this record. Not that like I want to listen to it and really enjoy it, but it's just an odd thing to have, and so I want to have it because that's how my brain's broken. So I started looking for cult records, and I found one called Cult Sounds. I think it was like $20, and it has all of these various cults on it. So there's the Jonestown Temple Choir singing. It has Raelians on it. Everyone's on there. People from the Manson family. So I'm doing a 2-part series where I'll do a background. It's like a sampler, a cult sampler. So I'll give background on the cult, and then I'll play the audio that's on the record. Right now I'm working on side B of that record, and that should be out this weekend.
For anyone listening now that hasn't heard it, should go check it out. I'll put up the link in the description so they can click on it. So for those who normally listen to my podcast, we're going to do kind of a combination, just the banter that I like, and then we each picked a topic. We'll discuss the obscure topics that normally wouldn't get covered. So it's funny that you mentioned the sex doll thing, because originally I was going to do it was 2 girls in Australia. Have you ever seen Wolf Creek?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's something that really happened very similar to that after the movie came out, however.
Oh.
But I could only find one source of information, so I'd literally just be copying this newscast almost verbatim, so I didn't run with it. But it's really cool. But it was 2 girls who were backpacking. One was from Brazil, the other was from Vienna or something. They're in Australia, and they want to see this particular sand dunes sea or whatever. It's called something creek, I can't remember. And they want to go see it, so they put an ad out. They met each other while backpacking. Their initial driver is like, oh yeah, I can take it the day of. He canceled. So they had this other guy that kind of just got a weird vibe from him, so they didn't take him up on it. Turns out they ended up having to if they wanted to go, because he was the only other person. Ironically, one of them, the night before leaving, was watching Wolf Creek with one of her friends, and he joked about how that's what's going to happen to her when she goes. Lo and behold. So anyway, the whole story is just about them going with this guy to the sand dunes to pitch a tent, and then everything turns for the worse when this guy snaps and tries to go Wolf Creek on them, and they end up getting away. But it's an insane story. The stuff that one of them endures is like so intense. She was beaten in the head with a shovel. He took the other one away to another side of the sand dune sea to have alone time with her, but this one woke up, found them, got on the roof of the car, and this guy's like trying to shake her off the car and trying to shoot her and hit her in the head with a hammer again a couple times. Like, it's insane. And they end up getting away in the end. And
that's another rough thing too. Like sometimes when you're doing like shows about murder and things like that, and you're like, well, this story's crazy. And then you stop and you're like, oh no, these are like real people. So like, I always try to be careful, like where I never want to like get enjoyment from like awful things happening to people. But then it's like, even if you look at our culture, like Netflix is filled with like murderers or like everything is like obsessed with serial killers. When I did a cannibalism episode, there was part of the episode where the cops break into this guy's apartment and he's cooking a small hand in a frying pan. And then he basically tells the cops, well, grocery bills are really high. And I was like, that's really dark. And then like, I just wanted to do like an episode about the different types of cannibalism. Then you're like talking about, you know, a little hand frying pan. You're like, oh, I guess I'll put this out. This is a show, I guess. So that's what I don't want to always have murder episodes just because it gets rough after a while.
Yeah, it definitely does.
It's good to scatter them out. But yeah, that's something that I might do better numbers on my murder episodes, but I don't want to have another murder podcast, and that's not what I want to talk about like each and every week. So
yeah.
Like I want to throw like goofy cryptids in every once in a while, or I have some stuff on hell that I want to do, like just like the history of hell through like various religions. Cool. Yeah, like that would be fun. And my next episode after this is going to be a pretty light one. I hope it's going to be on hobo, like the history of like the American hobo.
Oh, sweet.
And the culture, and that's been pretty pretty light so far.
Yeah.
I hope nothing awful happens that I have to talk
Are you going to
about.
research it, get a stick and put a bindle on it and try to travel across the country?
Graham and I wanted to do that a few years ago. Like we made plans and we were going to, and then Monique was like, no, you guys, my husband isn't doing that. So
Rightly so. You never know what'll happen.
but we're like, no, we'll just get as far as Montreal and we'll dress up like cartoonish hobos and we'll have bindles and we'll just jump on a train. It sounded like very normal and easy and like no problems at all. But then Monique, being the voice of reason, was like, that's not happening. So
That's good.
thank you, Monique. Who knows what would have happened?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Never would have came back the same.
Or maybe not come back.
Or just perpetually been like a hobo clown.
Yeah.
Just every day wake up, repaint your clown face.
Yeah.
Vice did a really good documentary on trying to mimic the hobo lifestyle. It was too short, in my opinion, but it was interesting that how hard it would be to do that now comparatively.
I watched that in researching for my next show. And there was a guy from, I believe he was from England. He came over to Canada and he has like a 4-part series. And it's probably like at least 8 hours on YouTube, maybe. It's something crazy where he traveled like all the way across Canada on a train just by himself and a camera. And he had like a little tent and he had black clothing and sometimes he would sleep on the train. A bull is the guy, like security in the rail yard.
Yeah.
A bull had seen him and was chasing him. And he actually hid on the top of one of the rail cars. It was like a double-decker one. And he like rode out of the yard on it. He almost got caught. But when he got back to England, his visa was like revoked. Like he's banned from coming back to Canada now.
Oh, wow.
He flew to Newfoundland to do it again. He was going to go a different route. And then they said, you can't come in the country. If you stay, we'll arrest you. Or you just sign this piece of paper, say you don't intend to come back. You get on a return flight and we just send you back to the UK.
Right.
Yeah. So he got in a lot of trouble for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was such an offense.
Yeah. Apparently it's like super bad.
Wow. Wonder why.
It's dangerous, I guess.
As I mentioned earlier, the topic was the history of the sex doll.
Nice.
Now, I couldn't find a lot of verifiable information, was the downside of this. Lots of hearsay, lots of allusions to things. But I did come up with a few points. And most things were just point form notes taken out of the same 4 or 5 texts. So the first reference to humans and pretty much predominantly always female forms. But I couldn't find a lot of mention of when the first male blow-up doll came out, which is really weird.
Yeah, it's something you would see like you're at a bar and there's a stagette party.
Yeah.
And all these girls come in with like light up glasses and like garish hats, and they have this dude with like a big mustache and he's like a blow-up doll.
Yeah.
I think they were always used as a goof. I don't think they were like sincere.
Yeah. That's the impression I got, but I couldn't find a whole lot. Again, I didn't dig extensively as I probably should have or could have, but... So the first mention was in the 8th century BC, and anybody who's studied classics or anything like that would have came across Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's a required reading. Not just Ovid, there's a lot of other writers that allude to either women being turned into statues or statues that are very realistic of women that some mythological dudes try to copulate with. But other than like mythologies and stuff, 17th century is one of the first documented since then, and it was when sailors would be coming into Japan because the Japanese took meticulous records of the gaijin they were coming across, and so they had these things called Dutch wives. Apparently it was the Dutch that initiated the trading of these Dutch wives with the Japanese. So the Japanese called them the rongaku, which was just simply Dutch wife. So basically all it was sometimes a cloth pillow-like thing or occasionally human-esque form made of cloth or leather with a penetrative hole. Now, the question initially is it only one dude that's using it? Are they sharing it? And then they're selling it off when they get to port in Japan. So how many STDs became an international epidemic or pandemic because of these guys?
I couldn't begin to imagine. And
I couldn't either.
You know they're not cleaning those
they're
out.
not clean. No. So, yeah, I couldn't even imagine the uncleanliness of a shipborne rongaku. So shortly after that, the Japanese began to emulate the rongakus and make their own love pillows. Some, again, had human-esque forms, but they called them the Azumagata Ningoyo. So they were written about in the 18th century. No pictures or drawings have survived, so they're not certain exactly what they looked like, but they assumed it was like a globulous humanoid or pillow-like form. Oddly enough, the base of them, or the main body, was constructed from turtle shells to give them rigidity.
Okay.
And then they would use leather and cloth to cover it over and pad it, and then velvet, which they got imported from the Dutch and the English for the penetrative hole.
Nice.
Yeah. So they upgraded a little bit.
They did.
Added a little turtle shell and some velvet.
How many turtles died, I wonder, to make these primitive sex dolls?
That I would like to know.
Yeah.
Then again, in 1877, and this was just sort of an alluding to a court case, a farmer was caught trying to copulate with a statue of Venus de Milo that he had found while tilling up his farm. No mention about if that's illegal or if it was legal, so I don't know what happened to him, but 1877, Venus de Milo, a statue. So it'd be a hard marble statue.
Yeah, I saw that this summer at the Louvre, and like thinking about it, like I don't know how you would. Yeah,
I don't know, like rub up against it or
maybe
onto it. I have no idea.
Maybe it's like government property or something. Maybe
probably. Antiquities,
I
think, probably. So the next thing I found was 1902. There was a Parisian circular, so it's like a newspaper or paper print magazine. So there was an ad for a lifelike custom-made dolls for 3,000 francs. Now, I'm not sure what 3,000 francs in 1902 would relate to now, but probably significant amount of money. But the ad said, all moves, arms, legs, buttocks, head, and eyes. A perfect likeness of a person from a photograph. The complete apparatus is guaranteed against breakage. And that one I found from somebody's thesis, Sarah Valverde. So it was her thesis about, I think it was on sex toys, actually. So I'm curious about those. Again, there's no pictures or anything, no sketches or anything surviving. So I'm curious how lifelike they were. Because I know back in the day, like early 1900s, they had some insanely lifelike dolls. So again, 1908. There was a book published called Sexual Life of Our Time. It was written by Ivan Bloch. And in this book, he noted that at that point, dolls had been manufactured out of rubbers and plastics in Germany.
Of course.
I didn't get to see much about the book itself. But again, I'm really curious what a rubberized doll in 1908 would look like.
Yeah.
Could they even vulcanize rubber back then? I don't know. They must have. They had like tires and stuff, so they must have been able to vulcanize.
Yeah. It was probably pretty crude. And
Oh yeah, it'd be like tire rubber.
Yeah. Like the original Michelin Man. If you've ever seen him, looks like a nightmare. That's probably what they look like.
That's exactly what. Maybe throw a wig on there.
Yeah.
1916, artist Oscar Kakashka, who was kind of spurned by a lover that left him. And after that, he kind of lost all interest in other sexual partners. So he went to a dressmaker, his former lover's dressmaker, since they had all her measurements. Got them to make a life-size doll version of her with plush teddy bear skin.
Yep.
Apparently, that's what he enjoyed for a portion of his life.
Was that the gentleman who had went away to war and his girlfriend had left him for another man, and when he had returned, she had left him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that guy, the person, it took them like 6 or 8 months or something like that to make that one, and the skin was made of like fine feathers.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay. Because it kept saying plush, so I assumed it was a teddy bear. But
so there were certain parts that had more give than others in the doll. But they said that the skin was made of like, because the guy kept saying it has to be really soft. So the person that manufactured the doll said, okay, and like made like really like fine like little feathers for the skin.
Wow.
And I was like, what a nightmare that would be.
I wonder how much he paid for that.
I don't know.
Apparently he ended up destroying it or something in a fit of rage.
Yeah.
It was there were a couple different stories that came across. One said he threw it in a fire. One said he ripped it up at a party. So 1920, welded vinyl became a thing. Now, for those of us who have seen a sex doll, the vinyl welds now are much better than they were back then. But they're sharp, they're rigid. I can't imagine how pleasantly useful something like that would be without causing grievous bodily harm. Where the welds are. But apparently the blow-up sex doll became a thing in the 20s. Apparently they barely looked human, but they had like simple appendages and a bulbous human form. Sometimes you could spend a little more and get a wig on it, or they would paint one on, and they would paint on nipples. And they had the classic open mouth. So that's where the open mouth started. Big red lips. Now this next one in 1941. Now this is the one that everybody's heard. And initially, I thought this might have been the start of the sex doll industry, was the Nazis. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of conjecture about how true it is, because not a lot of it was documented at the time, because supposedly it was ultra top secret. I'm sure you've came across it. Anybody who's ever looked into it has come across this as the number one thing. So there's lots of myths about it. Not a lot of verifiable facts. There were a lot of quotes that were supposedly from people at the time, but again, it's really hard to find the source of those quotes and whatnot. And a lot of the photographs that have come out have been proven to be a hoax or are just no longer available. So again, take it with a grain of salt. Apparently it was called the Borghild Field Hygiene Project, and it was to stop STDs amongst the soldiers. Mm-hmm. And another so-called reason was to stop non-Aryan breeding. They didn't want their soldiers breeding with non-Aryan women. So it was a request that the dolls needed round and full busts, a rose hip for better grip, and cheeky, naughty faces. So one thing that was perplexing me, rose hip. I know what rose hip is, like from the plant, right. But rose,
I wonder if it's
is that just like curvy hips or
maybe
something?
Maybe it's like an hourglass figure.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because that seems like a, I don't know, 1940s image of a, hourglass woman.
I wonder what would happen like when they were done, like, and they just like look down, like they're like, what have I done? Like, I wonder if there was like anything like that happening.
The remorse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Just like this weird humanoid rubber thing beneath you. And then like when it's over, you're like, well, this is who I am, I guess.
If anybody has an answer to that question, you can send that to paganplacemusic@gmail.com. We're both very curious.
Yes.
I don't know if I want personal experience stories, but that might be what I end up with.
They're probably better now than like...
1941, I imagine. It would just be... It'd probably pop constantly. You'd have to get like a patch kit to carry with you. Have in your pocket at all times. Like one you have for your bike tire when you're a kid. And apparently there were 3 types. 68 centimeter bust, 76 centimeter bust, and 82 centimeter bust. Now, I don't know much about bust lines and whatnot, so I don't know how those translate into... I mean, obviously, some are bigger than the others, but other than that, I don't know.
I'm ashamed to admit it, I'm not really that good with the metric system. Like, I'm better... If you said, like, something was a matter, like, so many inches, I could visualize that better than centimeters.
Yeah, I could too. Yeah. Easily.
I'll blame that on the school system, not myself. And
apparently another thing was when they were issued out, the soldiers were reminded that these are not to replace or diminish the role of the honorable mother and wife at home. Because that was a big thing with the German mythology that they were trying to build for themselves, that being a mother and a wife at home is like one of the most honorable things that you can do. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to have the women feel bad about that, or have the men being like, well, I got a sex doll now, so I'm not coming home again. Wanted to remind them that stay away from the brothels, don't breed with the French ladies, have this plastic doll instead. 1950 was the next one, and this one is a little bit more verifiable. It was called the Bild Lily doll. It was made in Germany, and it was modeled after a sexy comic strip character named Lily. It wasn't life-size, though. It was only about, the size of a big G.I. Joe, the 12-inch ones.
Right.
So this wasn't so much a sex doll, but it was a pornographic caricature. So it wasn't penetrable, but it was highly sexualized and just served the pornographic purpose. Some people said it as the influence for Barbie because of the figure, the dimensions were very similar. People dispute that. I don't know.
I bet Mattel disputes that.
Oh, yeah. Hands down. You won't hear that in Toys That Made Us.
I did see a lot of historical sexual items in Amsterdam.
Didn't you go to the museum?
Yeah, there's like a couple. I went to the Penis Museum and the Erotic Museum. It's some pretty wild stuff. Sometimes we think of people that came before us as being a little more prudish than they were. I saw some things and...
Not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases we're probably more prudish than some of our predecessors.
And then I was thinking, this picture is so old that these people stayed in this position and they held this pose, for this picture to develop. Because back then, And I was like, oh, wow.
Charlie horses galore.
Yeah.
So 1968, some of the first ads for vinyl blown-up sex dolls were seen in pornographic mags. 1970, manufacturers began using a combination of vinyl, latex, and silicone. I'm sure the seams got a little softer and less dangerous. Mm-hmm. So this is where the currently recognized typical blow-up doll came from. It was in the 1970s. Pretty much been the standard since. One thing I didn't know, the UK had banned the import of obscene and indecent materials up until 87. I didn't know that. I mean, I guess it's the UK. Kind of makes sense a little bit.
I wasn't aware.
So they had 1982, this company started trying to import stuff or export to the United Kingdom, and they were banned and they kept getting confiscated. So he took them to the European Court of Justice, and finally in 1987, they threw out the UK ban on the import of pornographic materials. So breaking ground with the sex dolls right there.
Yep.
1990s was the next big shift when artist Matt McMullen, he was trying to make more realistic mannequins, which is why after that point we started seeing nipples on mannequins. That's all this guy. So he was a mannequin designer, wanted them ultra realistic, better proportions, less like Barbie and more like a real woman. And his friends and stuff used to joke around about how anatomically correct he was going to make it. Then he had an aha moment or a eureka moment. It's like, hey, if I make this anatomically correct, people are going to give me good money for this. So I'm sure he had one line of just the realistic mannequins making money, and then he had the mannequins that were slightly more anatomically correct. So that was basically the birth of the real doll. Started with a mannequin. Back to the Venus de Milo in the field, pretty much.
Yep.
So he had various methods he had shifted and he kind of improved on up until 96 when the first female came out in 1996. Started with latex and he moved to tin-cured silicone. And then finally what we have today is the platinum-cured silicone, which is apparently the most lifelike, flesh-like feeling. Same company put out the first male real doll, at least in 2008. It's weird that it took so long.
Yeah.
From 96 to 2008. Misogynist? Is that? Maybe just didn't see the value. Didn't think women would want something like that as well.
Yeah. Well, also, like, I assume that these were all men in these industries.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about it.
So I'm not surprised.
So finally we moved into the 2000s, getting a little more up to date. So the Trotla company began to, now this one's a little more messed up, began to manufacture childlike sex dolls that they claimed were to help reduce predatory behavior, and they could deal with the urges. However, in Australia, there were a bunch of psychologists and doctors that were like, no, this is just going to make the problem worse. People that might be on the borderline that would never cross it might do this, and then they'll cross the line. So Australia was the first to ban it in 2013. So they started confiscating all of them. They was just straight up illegal. All the import companies, they were getting blocked. And then very shortly thereafter, the majority of the world started following suit, and these are just illegal now. In most countries, not all. And then we move into 2005. There was a Japanese company called Forest Dolls. They began to rent out their sex dolls in 40 shops across Japan for 13,000 yen or $146 US an hour. I don't know what a high-class lady of the evening costs these days, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any first-hand experience in this sort of thing.
But it seems high, right? $146?
I would think so. If you know what the standard rate is, send us an email. Let us know. We're curious. For a high-class situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Which obviously led way to the hotels, and very shortly thereafter, I know there's some probably in Amsterdam now, and various countries around the world. I don't know if there's any in Canada. I
heard Toronto was getting one. I don't know if it's open or not, but I remember seeing in the news that they were going to open one.
Yeah.
And then there's like another question too on how recently was like another guy in that room with doll.
Oh yeah, like the whole hygiene aspect of it. Like, I don't know.
That's questionable.
Unless they have enough that they can just take that doll out back to hose it down while they bring a new doll in, just swap them back and forth between rooms.
I remember it was on Discovery Channel. They had a documentary on the real dolls. I don't know how it works now, but for a time, every once in a while, like, and I think with the older models, they would kind of like wear out. They would need like upkeep and like tuning.
Yeah.
So this doll in a crate, they would ship it to this like one guy. I don't know if there's other guys, but there's only one guy in the documentary. And they made it seem like he was the only guy that would repair them. So then he was talking about repairing them. And he's like, sometimes you open up the crate and they're just so pretty. And I was like, oh no. Yeah, people are giving him money, probably a lot of money. I don't know how much. And then the cost of shipping is probably expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Like 100 pounds or something. And then he's having sex with it and then sending it. You're like paying him to have sex with the doll and then fix it and send it back. It was weird.
Oof.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he said it on camera and I was like, your customers are going to see this. Yeah.
Huh. I bet he still gets a lot of business, though. That one guy, they're like, we either get it fixed or we don't. I don't know.
I'll have to look him up.
Have you ever seen the movie Lars and the Real Girl?
Yes.
Okay, that came out in 2007. So that's kind of mostly where we're at now, except now there's some robots and stuff that are more lifelike, and they'll move and make sounds and whisper sweet nothings in your ear. But that state of things brings me back to, again, I think it was a Vice documentary that followed a couple guys that left their wives for real dolls. Very similar thing. So if you haven't seen Lars and the Real Girl, I highly recommend it. It's a great movie. Like, even if you're not into that sort of stuff, it's pretty awesome. But it's just about a guy that, I don't know if he lost his girlfriend or he's, whatever his state of mind might be at that time, he gets a girl and he tries to pass her off as a real human being that's his girlfriend, and whatever happens, I don't want to give away. You should just go check it out. It's really good.
Welcome back to the Pagan place. Here, let me chop up that poison for you. No, you keep the tip. All we need is a little like and share. That'll do just fine. There you go. Have a good day.
This is a good example too of some of the things like I run into for subjects where it's very like different. Like just based on this conversation, people would think that we had spent like a lot of time researching sex dolls, and it's very like up there on our list of like things to talk about. And, you know, we have a lot of information on it, but it's just like one of the many like weird things that it's just because it's, people are so different and you're like, oh, what's going on over there? What are they doing? That's interesting. That's offbeat.
Yeah.
And sometimes when doing an episode with something like this, I'm sure there are people who are lonely and for various reasons, this is like a healthy outlet for them. And I would never want someone to like hear it and feel bad, even though like,
right. Yeah. It's not intended to fetish shame you or sex shame you or anything like that.
But I mean, there's a lot of funny things in this. Yeah. Like from like thinking about like these crude rubber people or all of these different things, like there's a lot of humor in there. But that's like one of the things I find in doing my show is I don't want to make someone feel bad about something that's like not hurting anyone else, even though there's parts in there that are funny. And I just try to like walk that fine line, and hopefully someday I get better at that.
Yeah. No, it is true though. It's a precarious line. So definitely it's not to shame anybody, but especially from an outsider's standpoint, it's humorous. You find some little interesting facts like another name for the Dutch wife was the So I mean, that name alone leads you to believe that maybe there was only one or two of these things on the ship.
It's the first thing I thought of.
How there's no way that's a clean.
Yeah.
Anyway,
perfect. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was interesting. If I spent more time, I'm sure I could have got some better juice for it. But
and how crazy were the wormholes or rabbit holes that you got into?
Oh yeah, it was nutty. Like stuff that just took me way off topic, but it's still kind of in the realm of probably some of the things you'd seen in the sex museums and whatnot. And I think at one point I even pulled up a diagram of like a dissected anatomical penis or something came up in the feed, and I was like, oh well, that's not at all what I was looking for. I definitely sent that picture to a lot of people.
Yeah, sometimes like I'm working on a show and I'm like, am I on a list now?
Yeah.
Like all of
they're
these,
monitoring your internet usage. And
all of these books that are coming to my house now and all of these things I'm saying.
Yeah.
Someone watching me now?
Definitely.
And then sometimes like I can just say, you know, who am I to judge anyone? I have a show where I've spent over 100 episodes talking about He-Man. So
right.
we all have our things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that sometimes when I do an episode, you think of like that map on the wall with the bulletin board, all the pieces of paper and the string,
Yeah.
like connected to all the different thumbtacks and just like completely losing your mind.
They all go back to Steve.
And also it's a good outlet too, because my wife is really not interested in most of the things I have to say because she's more sensitive and reasonable than I am. Sometimes I'll be like, well, you can get like 80 pounds of meat out of a human body. And she's like, I don't want to talk about this. What's wrong with you? I was like, I have to text someone this now.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I come across something, I'm like, oh man, nobody wants to hear this, but somebody's going to end up getting this information.
It's just like, and even, I used to use Twitter. I still use Twitter, but more of like a news feed now.
Yeah.
I'm less active on posting on Twitter now. And I was always against Instagram, but I have absolutely fallen in love with Instagram.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
And if you look at my feed, it's like a release for me. I'm like, look at this stupid shit. And I like put it out and I laugh and I'm good. So I find that the podcast and social media is a good way for me to get it out of my system.
That's fair. Yeah.
Exercise my demons.
Who knows what'll happen if you hold it all in.
Yeah.
You might become one of the people that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And before we talk about my topic, did you hear about the guy in Philadelphia who dropped all of these letters off in people's mailboxes?
No.
So this guy, and I encourage everyone to look it up. So this guy, he's on camera. He's just like this old guy who's just like putting like folded up piece of paper in people's mailboxes. And he was talking about how all of the food you've ever eaten since first grade is still alive in your body.
Oh.
And he gives an address. He gives an address for a vacant lot. And it's happening sometime in March or April. I think April. but he wants everyone to go to this vacant lot, and they're going to need to build a furnace because the only way to survive is to make yourself into a statue and to melt yourself into some steel. And it's wild.
Everything you've ever eaten is still alive inside you. All that meat.
And that's another good example. I was like, this is hilarious. I was like, this is amazing. And then someone was like, started a GoFundMe for this, and all the proceeds go to mental health. And I was like, oh man, that guy probably does have mental health issues. But that never popped into my head. I was like, that's hilarious. You know, how wild is that? And then someone starts a GoFundMe, which is very nice. And I was like, oh yeah.
That happens often, like all the time. You hear somebody doing some wacky shit and you laugh at it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, really in the background, this guy does actually have issues that he needs to deal with, or she needs to deal with. And yeah.
I try to have a rule. So like I'll watch a lot of like fights that people post on YouTube or wherever, or Instagram. But then like, I was like, I can only enjoy this if both people are like willing, you know, contestants, combatants, because like, I don't want to enjoy like someone getting like beat down by a bunch of people. But if a couple people are in a, you know, parking lot and they're arguing over a parking space and they punch each other, they're both willing to do so. I'll get enjoyment for that.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean that I'm a great person. It's like, that's like kind of like my rule. I try to objectively look at things. And on social media, I also wouldn't want to put anything on social media that I wouldn't say in real life. So I've had like a couple Twitter accounts, and I've always used them as just like normal means of communication. I try not to like, no more of a troll than I would be in real life.
Right.
So that's kind of my thing. But that's like one of the weird things about the internet and going through content like this is trying to keep your humanity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when you go down the rabbit holes after like a couple hours of just reading these depraved, obscure facts, you kind of get lost in it. Like
I started looking up red rooms. Those?
I think so, yeah.
They seem to be debunked, and I'm happy with that. But I remember like I was looking and I was like, why am I looking for this? I don't need to see this or know about this. And then someone was like,
you need to learn to hack the deep web.
Yeah. They're like, they seem to be like thoroughly debunked. And I was like, okay, good. And then I just like stopped. I was like, I don't want to find a red room.
You don't want to prove it to yourself that they're real. Yeah, there's a lot of that out there. And you know, I have no doubt that they're real or any of those obscure things, but yeah, I don't need to see the real deal myself and be like, okay, I just watched this. Yeah. It's not fake. All right.
But do you find that's something that age is probably a part of it, and also like because we've had the internet longer? So remember in the early 2000s, all of those shock websites.
Oh yeah,
where you would like trick your friends into watching them, and you would like see all these horrible
Consumption things. Junction and Rotten.com. Yeah,
we were in high school looking at Rotten.com.
Oh yeah,
that didn't help us.
No, not at all.
Nope.
Yeah, there was some very raw. I don't know. Are those still going? I can't imagine they
Rotten shut down, I think, within the last year.
Yeah.
I hadn't been there in a long time. That's something like I put behind me. Like I remember like trying to like find videos to like, you know, ruin people with.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't need to do that. No, we're too old for that.
Yeah. I'm sufficiently warped at this point.
And something that was good about the internet was I was still in high school, and there was the Our Hollow Earth was a website in the late 90s. Like I remember I was in high school. I did a project on it because like I had a teacher that was, and I wasn't a bad student in high school, but he was like, if I let Steven do this, he'll put an effort into it. And then like, I'll just go with it. Like, I'll mark him like on his like grammar and like the essay and everything else like that. Eric Von Daniken's Charity of the Gods was in our school library.
Oh, wow.
So like that was there. And then I saw stuff like that online. Wow, those were two big ones. And I remember for Our Hollow Earth, they used to advertise that they were going to have expeditions. And I didn't think that the earth was hollow, but I wanted to like read about people who thought the earth was hollow. And I pretended that I was like an adult and I had money to throw around. And I kept emailing because there was a forum on the website. And I was like, no, I want to go on this cruise. And you get off at like, I don't know if it was the North Pole or South Pole that they were going to go in. But they talked about how there was like fossils and stuff like that outside the opening. And I would always email this website and be like, oh, you know, I'd like to go. How much money do you need? It's not a problem. And they would never, ever message me back. And it used to really bum me out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wonder if they were used to people jiving them like that, or they were like...
I was 17, so I probably wasn't as slick as I thought I was.
Yes, that could be it too.
That would be also part of it.
Or they were just like, it was just so fake that they just didn't want to lead people on. They're like, oh, if we take this guy's money, we're going to have to do something with it.
Yeah. And the Illuminati, that was like a big thing on the internet.
Oh,
I mean, it still is, but I mean in the late 90s.
Yeah.
For media studies, I did the Illuminati's influence on the media. And I didn't necessarily like believe what I was putting, but it was always interesting. And I think that things like Unsolved Mysteries or In Search Of, and all of these shows that we had growing up as kids, like I love Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, me too.
I don't necessarily think that Bigfoot's real, but I love the idea of Bigfoot. And I hate that, guy that says like Gone Squatching or whatever, like finding Bigfoot or hunting.
Yeah.
I can't handle that show. But if there's like a scientist that like goes out like that dude on Netflix and like,
Oh, yeah.
like stuff like that, like I can enjoy that.
I've also been binge watching Unsolved Mysteries lately.
I actually bought that record.
Yeah, I saw that.
And you were on my New Brunswick Unsolved Mysteries episode.
Right.
Which was a fun one to do.
I'll include a link to that one too.
Yeah, that was a fun episode. And speaking of New Brunswick Unsolved Mysteries, the museum has an oven door from Leinster Street. Have you heard about this?
No.
So look it up online. It's really interesting. So apparently there was a house on Leinster Street that has since burned down. But in the basement, there was a crematorium or something in the basement. And someone was cremated, and there was like the face of someone on the door of the crematorium. And the oven door is at the New Brunswick Museum.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's like on display or not. Like I've been to the museum. And I was like, is it just something like weird where someone's like, oh, it's at the museum? But I'm actually going to contact the museum and see if I can get like a picture of it or find out a little bit more, see if they can confirm it.
Yeah.
I only found it like after it was too late for that episode, but that's something I'd like to do because I'd like to do another one of those
You could
episodes.
start out your other episode like how Unsolved Mysteries does, like the updates.
Yeah, and like that was fun too because I went back through the old Unsolved Mysteries episodes and I was like clipping audio like for segments and stuff like that. So that part was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah,
and that was a great show.
Oh, that was an amazing show. It still holds up too. Like
Robert Stack was perfect. His voice and just standing there in the mist in his
trench coat.
Yeah,
sold it every time. He's like an old gumshoe.
Yeah,
I won't give the name of the brand away because they're not giving me money. But Steve brought over delicious coconut vanilla milk stout, and this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm actually surprised because last time I had a vanilla stout, it was not good. It had a hint of vanilla, but it was like almost like an imperial stout. So it was like vanilla with facts or something. And it was just, it was a porter. That's what it was. It was vanilla.
Was it purple can?
It was from a tap.
Okay.
I mean, by the end of it, you had enough of it in you that it started to taste okay. Yeah. But it took almost half a pint to be able to be like, so I never got it again. And so I'm actually really impressed by this.
I'm obsessed with porters and stouts. That's almost what I drink like exclusively.
Yeah.
But that is one of the things that happens, but people don't buy a lot of porters and stouts compared to like IPAs and other beer. But I love them. And I can sit there and drink them all night and like be fine. But that's probably going to disappear like in a month, and I might not see it again.
Yeah, I might have to get a few of these. They're really good.
Yeah. Anything that has like a malty chocolate coffee roasted like flavor, like I'm really into. And it's funny because like I drink 1 or 2 beers every day. They're always like vanilla porter or sorry, not vanilla, but they're just like a regular porter or a stout. And I don't know anything about beer. So like I enjoy the shit out of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know what anything on the can means. Like I know how much like alcohol is in it.
Yeah.
Like as soon as they start talking about, oh, these are Cascade hops, I'm like, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea.
All I know is some give you that really nasty snap with the heavy IPAs that I don't like. I don't know anything about it other than that. But I do know that I'm not a big fan of IPAs anymore.
I used to really like IPAs, but they became like a nuclear arms race to be like more and more bitter.
Yeah. It's lost what it used to be.
Yeah, so
they've lost sight. IPA, you have lost sight of your mission.
They have, and they should be ashamed.
They should be ashamed.
And I'll always like, there's a few beer accounts I follow online, and I'll always tag like NB Liquor. I'm like, oh, can we get this? And they're like, yeah, we'll send it off to the team, and we never hear anything back from them.
Oh yeah. Doesn't surprise me.
They'll answer me on, and I'm very respectful, but I'll answer, like I'll message them on Instagram, and they're always like, oh, we'll look into it. The only definitive answer they ever gave me, I loved the Garrison brown ale.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Nut brown ale.
Yeah.
They don't have it in New Brunswick anymore.
No. Can you get it in the multi-packs that they have?
No.
Wow.
No, just gone.
Because I know that's the only way you can get the raspberry wheat, which I love, especially in the summertime when you're barbecuing. You could drink scads of it, and it sits really well.
And I messaged them, and I was like, hey, can we get this back? Because I was in Nova Scotia at the time, and I was like, oh, I have to go to Nova Scotia to get this. Like, can we get more of this?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, there's no room for it, but try one of the other ones. I was like, oh, this is the one I want.
Great answer. NB Liquor.
I was probably the only one that ever messaged them on Instagram, though, like, hey, get this together.
So I'll post up the links for Steve's podcast and Steve's social media. You'll be able to find them. You can get the podcast virtually anywhere you can get podcasts.
Podcast of the Universe. You can find me on Instagram, and there's a link there. My Instagram is thisispo2, like this is Podcast of the Universe. If you don't want to listen to my podcast, you might be able to enjoy my Instagram. I put nonsense on there pretty much all day.
I think if they liked your Instagram, they would like your podcast. They kind of go hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah, and if anyone ever has any ideas or suggestions, let me know. That's one of the weird things too is with my Masters of the Universe, I don't really know my audience. One of the things about that part of Twitter and social media was it was very like open and it was very positive, which was weird. So when I started using social media, it was mainly for MMA coverage. I'm a huge MMA fan, but MMA fans are some of the worst people in the world. Not all of them. I have like maybe a couple friends who watch, but originally I was like, that was kind of like my view of like social media. So I didn't interact that much on it. Like maybe I'd shitpost a little bit, but I wasn't too active. But when I started this Masters of the Universe show, they were just like very supportive and friendly, and everyone was like nice to each other. It was weird. I was like, what's going on? I thought this was the internet. But I don't have
nobody's hating on anybody.
But I have I don't really have a lot of interaction like with the people that listen. Like I have no idea who listens. Just that there's like 93 people listen to that episode.
Yeah.
And then I never heard anything back. But then like they listen next week. Now with this show, I started a Twitter account, but this Twitter account I found was harder because there's no niche for it.
Right. Yeah. It's its whole new thing.
Yeah. And it's so wide open.
Right.
So I was like, I'm just going to spend most of my time on Instagram, and I'll use it like my personal account too. Cause I don't want to I already have like 3 Twitter accounts. I don't want, 2 Instagram accounts. And I'm really falling in love with Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
So I'm just using that like a personal one and for the show. Like, I've had issues with Tim Hortons. I went like 0. I think it ended up being like 0 and 20 or 0 and 21, but I was so mad. And I was looking, I would go to my profile and I would see all these roll up the rim cups, and I was like, I just look like a crazy person now. Just like maybe more than 50% of my feed just turned into like my war with Tim Hortons. And I was like, they're not going to engage with me. Like they have there's no benefit to them. Answering me. They're not going to answer me.
Unless they just start sending you some free donuts or coffee.
I didn't even want that.
I would.
I just wanted better odds. But since then, I think I've won 2 coffees and a donut. So I'm like 3 for like 28 now.
What is it? What's the ratio?
It's supposed to be 1:6.
Yeah, 1:6.
So I kind of like backed off, and like I was like sending them like Vanilla Ice videos, and like because I was mad at them. I have to stop. I'm not going to spend my energy on this.
I love that you were sending that. It's funny that they got pulled down. So it must have been the copyright issue. I can't imagine it was Tim Hortons, but maybe it was. I have no idea.
Yeah, there's a larger conspiracy. They were silencing
it's the Illuminati, man.
Yeah.
That should be your next episode. Tim Hortons tie-in with the Illuminati.
Yeah. Then they'll come for me.
Yeah. It'll disappear. They'll put you in a coffee. You'll be in their next batch of beans that's been sent out. I did get a coffee plant. So like in 10 years, I'll have enough for a pot of coffee. Yeah.
So I won't need Tim Hortons for like 2 days or something. Maybe. They said in 10 years, it'll start growing coffee beans. So we'll see.
How big do they get? Do you know?
I have no idea. I'm the worst with plants. I've killed cactuses and ivies. So right now I have this thing called, and I posted on Instagram because everything I do in my life, I put on Instagram now. I'm like those people I used to laugh at and make.
It's funny how those things change.
It is. I was like, oh, here's some food I'm cooking. They're called living stones, and it's a type of succulent.
Yes.
And it looks like a brain. And I have my second one is starting to open now. And they're really wild. So eventually, like when they get to be like 4 or 5 years, a flower will come out and it'll open in the daytime and close at night. So I have twins on the way. So I need to like learn how to look after plants.
That's a good starting point. Yeah. Keep the plants alive and hope for the best with the twins.
Yeah, absolutely. Cedar Crest is just around the corner from us. So they've been very helpful with guiding me on plants to choose. And they're like, oh, here's a plant that, thrives on neglect. I'll take that. And they'll pot them for you for free.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you buy the pot, but I mean, they'll like take care of it.
Yeah.
Which only, extends the life of that plant before I have to do it. So
yeah, until your neglect kicks in.
Yeah. So back to the coffee thing. That was my issue with Tim Hortons. Hopefully it gets better, but I'm probably not going to have a great ratio by the end of this.
No, it's already pretty skewed. You'd have to.
Yeah. And it's not even good coffee. I mean, I have to drink it every day because like that's who I am. Like I need that first coffee to be Tim Hortons, but I couldn't like defend it and be like, oh, this is excellent coffee.
Yeah. No, it's not.
No.
It was better than office coffee.
Yeah.
Miles ahead of office coffee.
Yeah.
But it was almost the worst that you could buy.
And they're like, they just got like a horrible grading on their use of plastic.
Oh, really?
Like their one-time plastic use.
Yeah.
Like they had like an awful score. It's like they're just like polluting everything and giving us bad coffee. Then I'm still going to buy tomorrow like a hypocrite.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't you brew at home? That's my question if you don't like Tim Hortons that much.
I have a French press and I love it.
Yeah.
I just hate waiting.
It would take you less time to boil the water, wait the 5
sure.
minutes for the coffee than it is to go to the Tim Hortons.
And then you got to clean it out. And then you got to get in the nooks and crannies and like scrape all like the beans and stuff out, like the grinds. But yeah, it's 100% better coffee. It's way better.
It is.
But I have a K-Cup and I recycle like as much plastic as I can. Like my wife is like really on me. I'm not like a big environmentalist. Like I try to be like somewhat conscious.
Yeah.
I'll be like, I'll rinse this out and recycle it. Like I'll go to the bins. But my wife's like the one that's like hardcore, like save the environment. I try to like do the best I can. But I mean like Keurigs are still bad to use. I use those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I should be on the French press all the time. I mean, it's better coffee. And
it is. I get Piccadilly coffee, which is delicious. I'll send a little bit home with you to give it a try, and they're awesome. I'm pretty sure that they're probably the favorite coffee really to date that I make myself. That it's just super flavorful and they got tons of selection. I'll post a link up to them as well since they were kind enough to send me a bit of coffee in a mug.
Someone should be sending Kaylin beer.
They should be. Actually, I have an event coming up, and it's not just me, it's me and a team of people are going to make videos for all the musicians I've had on that I haven't made a video for, but they're all going to be like with an actual filmography team.
Nice.
And that I'm trying to get sponsored. So if you make beer, or you're working for a beer company, or you're a beer rep, or a whiskey or scotch rep, I'm not picky, and you want to sponsor it, let me know. Shoot me an email, leave me a message. paganplacemusic@gmail.com, and I will gladly put your logo up on every video that's shot during that day if you supply the beer for our guests.
And they would be supporting local.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep it local.
What I used to do on my old show, I would try to like mimic other shows and be like, oh, what does this show do? What does that one do? And I was like, every show has ads. And I was like, I'm not going to read a Casper mattress ad. So like whatever beer I was drinking, I would just like shout them out. Or I would go to like look up 1980s Minolta camera ads.
Yeah.
I would watch a YouTube video and like transcribe like what was said in the commercial. And I would read that like as the taglines in the commercials.
That's awesome.
It's a fun part about like podcasting is like shouting out products you enjoy.
Yeah, and I'd love to keep it as products I enjoy, obviously. But
yeah, you don't want to go back and do ad copy for a 1980s product you can't buy anymore.
When I started out on radio, we had a show called H to the C on campus radio, and it was late enough at night that we could push the limits of what we could get away with, kind of thing. So we made all our own ads, like we had pre-ads and all. I'll see if I can pull some up here. I recently found some. I don't know if they're on a disc or if I put them on my hard drive, but just hilarious. Some were mildly offensive. I can't even remember half of them, but we got a little creative with them. They're fun.
How long ago did you have a radio show?
That would have been like 2003, probably to 2000 and... No, maybe I came on board around 2004 probably, and did it for about 5 years, I think.
I know a guy who lost a show.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, a hip-hop show, and he played a necro in Ill Bill Freestyle.
Oh, yeah, I can see why that would get him in some trouble.
So they said, we have to have a meeting about your show, and he knew it was over, and he didn't even show up for the meeting.
That's fair.
Yeah.
We did get kicked off 2 times. First time we were suspended. Second time we got kicked off, and they said that we weren't going to be able to come back. We talked them. We somehow, I don't even remember what the issue was. Something that one of the clubs at the school, somebody heard and they were offended by it, and then there was a big hubbub. But they did end up letting us back. We justified it in front of the board. But then they just put us on another suspension, and then we could come back. And then eventually we were just done and moved to the podcast. We did the podcast version of it for a while, and then we all just sort of went our own ways, and we all do something now, but...
Yeah, I heard you a couple weeks ago. You did the show. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. At Music We Like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I find that, like, I'm always, like, listening to podcasts or doing something, but every once in a while I'm in the kitchen. There's a radio in the kitchen, and I'll put it on, like, the campus radio.
Yeah.
Because if there's ever music on the radio that I want to hear, it's usually, like, that station.
Yeah, it's always that or CBC for me, and that's pretty much the only 2 stations I'll listen to.
Radio music's pretty awful.
It's horrible.
Yeah. I remember when we were kids, so in junior high, we were very... scheming kids. So we went to C98. So I was in grade 8, and we told the teacher for career day, we said, well, we want to be radio disc jockeys. And they went, okay. So Steve Mackin was working on the radio at that time. And so we called the radio station and said, oh, we want to do this for school or whatever. So because we did it at night and we were there like late, like in quotations, we had the next day of school off. Because the other kids that did career day, they were gone in the daytime. So we got to go to the radio station at night, and we had the next day off.
That's awesome.
We thought we were brilliant. So we went there, and it was just like a dark room, and it was like me, Rob, and Steve Mackin, and he just like slowly drank a beer and talked to us. And we didn't really want to be radio DJs, but like in junior high, you would listen to the radio every night and try to like record music on a cassette tape and make a mixtape. 'Cause it's the only way you could get like...
Oh, it was an art.
Yeah. So I remember he gave us like a bunch of like... giveaway stuff. Like we had like little Ozzy Osbourne pins. I think it was around the time Osmosis came out.
Oh, sweet.
And Slick Toxic t-shirts. I don't know if you're familiar with Slick Toxic.
No, I don't think so.
I think the band died, or one of the guys died in a limo accident.
Oh, okay.
They weren't a good band. Anyway, we had these Slick Toxic t-shirts and we wore them. Everyone's like, who's that? And we're like, Slick Toxic. And it was like kind of a joke. But yeah, so I remember like thinking like the radio would be like so fun and cool to go do, and it was just a man sitting like in a dim office, just like hitting a button and just sitting there, and then just like idiot kids like us calling like every 5 minutes.
Oh yeah. That kind of radio I can't see being fun.
No.
If you had a partner, maybe you can bounce stuff off of. Like that was sort of our shtick, even with campus radios. Have somebody with you can joke around with, and it was a good time.
We haven't mentioned him, but I have someone. His name's Hat, and he's awful. He's a nice guy, but I mean, as far as like zero conversation at all. He won't use his real name. He just uses his nickname. But he's awful. I mean, I appreciate his help. He comes in. We've had some problems that were his fault, but he's doing better. My goal is for someday him to say something. I don't need like a continuous back and forth, but you know, just so people don't think I'm like a lunatic in my basement. He's a weird guy though. I told him to get some ads or even just like plug some stuff. He couldn't do that. He was awful.
Eventually you'll be able to let him go.
Well, he's worried about that. He says he doesn't care, but there was one episode I did without him, and I knew he was listening. See how it went.
Test run.
Yeah.
I keep looking over at your sheet here to see if I can get a gleam of what your topic is.
Sure. So my topic is the Circleville Letters. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
Okay, perfect. So this is something that I was aware of, and this is one that was like bouncing around for a little while. I didn't want to come on and talk about anything too grisly, because normally you have musicians, and so I've heard all of the episodes except for I'm behind on, I've not necessarily gone in order, but the person, I don't know her name, but she, Maritime Hiker.
Meandering Maritimer.
Yes. So I haven't listened to that one yet, and there's one more that I haven't listened to yet. So what I like about the show and the format is, even if I don't necessarily enjoy the music, and a lot of the music is great, but like, you know, not every music is for everyone.
Right.
It's always interesting to hear people talk about like their process and what they're into and stuff like that. So when I was thinking about coming onto the show, I was like, am I just going to sit down and be like, oh, so 13 people were brutally murdered? So I didn't want to bring that energy to the show. So I wanted to have something that was a little more accessible, a little more PG, but still very mysterious, and an actual thing that happened. Because some things on my show, even if I don't necessarily believe that they happen, I can still enjoy it. But I wanted to do like an actual mystery that wasn't too graphic or unsettling.
Right. Okay.
So my story is about the Circleville Letters. 25 miles from Columbus, Ohio, you will find Circleville, small town America with a population of just under 14,000 people. Wikipedia states the city is best known as the host of the Circleville Pumpkin Show, an annual festival held since 1903. That is the only place that I saw anything about the Circleville Pumpkin Show. Now, the person who this is about doesn't have a great name, but this is the name that the media gave them. In 1976, many residents in Circleville began receiving anonymous letters from an individual who seemed to know a lot about them. 1977, the subject of our story, Mary Gillespie, was a wife and mother. She began to receive these letters, and hers were a little more troubling.
Oh, I do know what this is about. Yeah, okay, all right.
This was on Unsolved Mysteries as well.
Right, it was.
So the letter's author advised her that she and her home were being watched, and the anonymous author was aware of her affair with Gordon Massey, the school superintendent. She was ordered by the letter writer to stop the alleged affair, and that this was not a joke. She received multiple letters, and at first she didn't share them with her husband Ron, and began keeping a watchful eye wherever she went, wondering if her unwanted pen pal was nearby. She kept it hidden until Ron himself received a letter addressed for him. Ron's letter told him of the affair and that he needed to end it or he would die. Mary told her husband there was no affair, and they decided to try and ignore the letters, which was difficult, as other letters began circulating to those in the community detailing of Mary's affair with the superintendent. The Gillespies then received a letter that read, "Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out." And in my research, I read that they might not have meant CBS, the news or the television station. The CBS might have actually stood for CB's, like CB radio. Ron and Mary began brainstorming on who it could be, and for a time they suspected Ron's brother-in-law, Paul Freshour, who was married to Ron's sister Karen. They sent multiple letters telling him to stop, and for a time they believed that had scared him off as they had stopped. As things began to return to normal, Ron answered a phone call on August 19th, 1977, and no one knows for sure who was on the other end or what they said, but many believed it was the Circleville letter writer. Whatever was said on that call caused Ron to become enraged, grab his pistol, and quickly leave the house. He didn't get far as he drove his truck into a tree and died. When the authorities arrived, they discovered that Ron's gun had been fired once, but they never learned why or what it was fired at. The accident was deemed just that, an accident, and despite the odd circumstances surrounding Mary and Ron, it was a case closed. It was also discovered that Ron's blood alcohol was 1.5 times higher than the legal limit. This was strange, as his children said he had not been drinking, and those close to Ron said he had abstained from alcohol. Now, the sheriff is going to pop up a lot in the story. His name is Dwight Radcliffe. Allegedly, Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe had said that there was more to the crash, but later denied making such comments. The letters continued to even more people, and they began asking for further investigations, as the author was not happy with Ron's death being ruled as an accident, and they declared that there had been a cover-up. When the accident happened, Mary was not at home. She was actually in Florida with her friends, and there was a lot of speculation that Superintendent Massey had gone down to meet her there to continue their affair. The letters to Mary Gillespie continued after the death of Ron, and as well as to her immediate family and to town officials. The letters contained various threats and were often vulgar in nature. It was then Mary couldn't keep it a secret anymore and admitted to the affair, but she did, however, say it only began after the letters started coming in. That seems pretty fishy. So the letters are saying that she was having an affair with the superintendent, and then after her husband dies, she admits to having a relationship with the superintendent, but then says, oh no, it was after the letters started. Right. So I had a red flag on that. Through the scandal and gossip, Mary actually kept her job driving school bus, and 6 years later, on her route, the mysterious author had upped the ante. A sign was posted on her route threatening the life of her daughter. Mary stopped the bus and went to remove the sign. Before she pulled the sign out of the ground, she noticed there was a box with a string attached to it, and the string was tied to another post. She opened the box, and inside was a pistol which was booby-trapped, so when she had pulled the sign, if she didn't notice it, the gun would have gone off, and the intention was that she would have been shot. She reported this to the police and brought the gun in the box, and the police discovered a worn-down serial number, but it was visible enough to be traced back to her brother-in-law, Paul Freshour. So Paul had recently divorced Ron's sister Karen, and he had gained custody of their children and remained in the house. So Karen had moved into a trailer onto Mary's property. When the police went to him with the gun, he again denied writing the letters, said the gun had been in his garage for years, and he had never checked on it for quite a while, as he had no need for it. The gun was the only evidence the police had, so this is some stereotypical small-town police work. They convinced Freshour to take a handwriting test. It wasn't so much a test as they gave him a copy of one of the letters and they told him to copy the letter as best he could. So then when he did, they said he did it. He's the letter writer. I don't know if he had a lawyer or if he had a bad lawyer or how this flew, but it did.
Bad lawyer, best.
Yeah. So that was the handwriting test where they said, do like this letter. And he did. And they went, you're under arrest. So Freshour went to trial on October 1983, and he brought with him an alibi for the day of the booby trap. Despite the alibi, he was found guilty and sentenced for 7 to 25 years in prison, and there wasn't enough evidence to charge him with the letters, but it didn't stop the prosecution from repeatedly bringing up the letters throughout the trial. So even though he did the letter writing test, and that's what he was arrested on, that flew in court. So the general consensus of the Circleville residents was that Freshour had authored the letters and attempted to kill Mary, despite evidence to the contrary. So before we assume that they got the right guy, because, I mean, they do have his gun with a file down serial number, but before we assume that they have the right guy, Sheriff Radcliffe went to the press and said Freshour confessed to writing 40 to 50 threatening letters, but there was no signed confession stating that, or even a recording of a confession. Paul's fingerprints were not found on any of the letters, the gun, or the booby trap. A search of his house turned up no evidence of materials for any of the crimes. So Mary Gillespie, at his trial, testified that Karen confided in her that she thought Paul was the author of the letters, but Karen had never used this in divorce court, which, if I was divorcing someone, I would put that on him.
Yeah, that'd be square evidence to validate that.
And like I mentioned earlier, Freshour had an alibi witness for the afternoon that the booby trap was found. Another school bus driver saw a man not fitting Paul's description in a yellow El Camino 20 minutes before Mary spotted the booby trap sign. The description didn't match Paul, but they matched a man that Karen Freshour was now dating, and Karen's brother owned a yellow El Camino. There were shoe prints at the scene, but they didn't fit Paul's shoe size. So there's no evidence at all.
Did you know what
By all accounts, Fresh Hour was a model prisoner, but the Columbus postmarked letters continued. So I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. So they live in Circleville, Ohio, and all of the letters are coming postmarked from Columbus. So they're not even coming from their town.
Interesting.
And then once he's in jail, the letters continue. And he wasn't serving his sentence in Columbus. He was 90 miles away doing his bid in Lima, Ohio. So the prison officials didn't like Fresh Hour for the crime, but the authorities did. And they maintained that he was still somehow responsible, even though he was in jail. So due to the letters continuing, Paul was placed in solitary confinement and denied access to writing materials. The letters still kept coming in. Even though it was impossible for him to be sending the letters, he was denied his first parole hearing in December of 1990. A few days later, he received a letter from the Circleville Letter writer. It's an awful name.
Say that 7 times fast.
So it read, "Now when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all." And he's in jail. He's in jail for this.
Yeah.
Months after Fresh Hour was released in May of 1994, Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment on the Circleville Letters. A few days later, the network got one of their own. It said, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Ratcliffe." They spelled his name wrong. "If you come to Ohio, you L sickos will pay." The Circleville writer.
Huh.
In 2011, Fresh Hour launched a website. It's still up today. It's circlevilleletters.wordpress.com. So it's still up. It has all of the documents he had sent the FBI and his request for them to investigate Ron's murder, because he always maintained that his ex-brother-in-law had been murdered. He did not request that they investigate the crime that he was convicted for, but he did insist that he was innocent. He also accused Sheriff Radcliffe of corruption for the perceived cover-up. Now, some of his accusations I don't know if I could get behind, but here's what he had to say. Fresh Hour said that arsenic was being put into the letters, that the letters were an attempt to have Superintendent Massey fired, that Massey had lost his previous job for improper relations with an employee. He alleged that Sheriff Radcliffe was cooking the crime stats to further his career and downplaying them so he could stay in his role, which I'm sure happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Like that one seems okay. He alleged that Radcliffe was protecting the county coroner from child molestation allegations, and that the DA who prosecuted him impregnated a teacher and had her murdered. That one seemed a little odd.
Wow, yeah.
Or maybe this little town is that corrupt. I don't know. Officially, the letters ceased in 1994, and this was around when Fresh Hour was released from prison. On Reddit, and it's Reddit, so take it for what it's worth,
Yeah.
Shocker GD reported that they continued actually until 2001. Paul Fresh Hour passed away in 2014, and the Circleville Letter writer was never found. So there is a theory, and there's a few theories, but one of them is that Paul was framed by his ex-wife Karen due to him serving her with divorce papers, gaining custody of the children, keeping the house, and that Karen was one of the few people who knew where the gun was in the garage. And with Paul in prison, she was able to get custody of the kids back, and she got the house back. So that's one theory, which is plausible. Some think that the original letters were written by a man named David Longberry. So we haven't heard about him in the story, and this was introduced after. He was another school bus driver who fancied Mary Gillespie, but she never returned his affections. In 1999, Longberry committed suicide while on the run from authorities for the rape of an 11-year-old girl. And with that theory, people are saying that there might have been more than one letter writer. So for suspects, there was Paul Fresh Hour, Karen Fresh Hour, his ex-wife, the man Karen Fresh Hour was dating that matched the description near the sign before Mary saw the booby trap sign, her brother who had the yellow El Camino, the wife. It was hard to find. I didn't find a lot of information on Superintendent Massey's wife, so certainly she could have been a suspect as her husband was having an affair, and David Longberry. So that was the mystery, a mystery to this day.
Huh. Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had heard a little bit about that, but I'd never really, it was probably a little outdated, actually. I think maybe the Unsolved Mysteries is probably this, as far as my information got, or something close to that anyway. That's crazy. You gotta wonder, the gun is one thing that I'm curious about. Like, did he report it missing? Did he know it was missing?
So his story for the gun, which doesn't look good. So his story for the gun is, I keep it in the garage, it's hidden, I don't use it, I don't have a need for it, I don't even check on it, it's just in a garage. And it's also 1977, so maybe you're a little more fast and loose with the storage of your
Oh,
farms.
I mean...
and it's America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in the boons, and we had guns, and there were definitely guns that were, once they were locked away, they were not checked on for years until there was a need to go get that particular gun.
Right.
So that I can kind of believe.
Yeah.
And I remember I knew someone who had a gun. They kept it under their staircase, which was like a little storage area. And it'd be like once every couple years, just a handgun that he would bust out and go to the gun range. And that's the only time he ever looked at it. So I think that's kind of believable. But yeah, still raises a little suspicion. Fingerprint thing. No fingerprints, nothing. And if he had nothing in his house, who do you think it was?
Well, my issue with the gun is that it seems like the serial number was attempted to be removed. But if you were trying to set Paul up, why would you try to remove it? Yeah, you wouldn't touch the serial. You would leave it.
Yeah, that's true too.
So that was an issue I had with Paul's story. I don't know what motive he would have to set up his ex-brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Or sorry, his ex, to like harass them and like put her affair out there. Like, I don't... Like, you think he would just like tell... But
again, maybe the wife, where it's her brother that's getting screwed around on.
Yeah.
Maybe she was like, oh, my brother's getting screwed around on. I know about it.
And I'll pin it on my husband.
Because she wanted the kids back. All that stuff.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
In the house, yeah.
It was her. It was totally her.
And she could have had help from her brother who had the yellow El Camino.
Yeah.
And her boyfriend who was...
He's already,
someone matching his description was at the scene.
He's already on the outs with the law anyway. So it's like, I'll set up this booby trap to shoot your brother's wife.
They didn't even find ammunition for Paul's gun.
Oh, really?
Like in their search, yeah.
Huh.
They found nothing. And also, he seemed pretty adamant. Like, if you go on his website, it's a broken down WordPress, but the files are still there. He seems like he wasn't so much trying to like clear himself. He was trying to like figure out what happened to his ex-brother-in-law, and he felt there's more going on there. So I think that was... Maybe he just like put that behind him and he had moved on, but he still wanted justice maybe.
Right.
But it's hard to look at one person and say, I like this person for the crimes.
Yeah, there's a little bit of
and
spread evenly about.
One of the hard things, so like when I was researching it, everyone, like everything that was reported was, many of the residents. There's 14,000 people, just under 14,000 people in the town. How many people actually got letters? Was it 200? Was it 1,000?
Right.
In what were in those letters. And I couldn't find any copies of those letters other than most of the town or a lot of the town. But it was hard because that's 14,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And also, if you want to think about like the small town like that, and then you're getting threatening letters from people and they know a lot about you. So then you're going into the grocery store and you'd be like, are they here now? Are they watching me
everybody
now?
would be paranoid all the time.
Yeah.
Crazy. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that one. As soon as you mentioned the letters or got into it there, first thing I remembered was the gun at the sign. I was like, oh, that's that one. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. But I didn't know the end of it because, like I said, my information was a little outdated on that one. Definitely a safe one to go with.
Yes, yes.
I'll definitely throw up all the links so everybody listening can follow the links. Find Seam, definitely check out his podcast, especially if you're even remotely interested in his story, which was much more thoroughly done than mine. Again, you definitely need to do the history of the sex doll episode because you'll get a lot more out of it than I did.
And that's the thing, like this podcast that I'm doing is everything except for He-Man because I already have the He-Man one. But I find that it's nice, just like you can have like any type of musician in. Like imagine if you just had like one type of genre of music that you brought people in, just like week after week.
Same thing.
Yeah. But you have like all of this talent in St. John that, people probably don't know about, that you can bring them in.
Right.
And that's got to be really fresh for you. And
it is every time. Yeah, I love it.
And that's what I like about doing this episode because it got kind of stale talking about like He-Man all the time. And I'm not happy with the format anymore. My shows got further and further apart because of the evolution of the newer show. So
right.
But it's nice. I'm enjoying this variety and I can talk about whatever I want, just not He-Man. It's the only rule I gave myself.
Yeah.
Just as long as it's not about He-Man.
That's a safe rule.
Yeah.
You'll evolve a lot too, I think. Even this year, I made a few tweaks coming into January, and then I already have things I have planned for the next new year that I'm going to change out, and things I'm going to slowly tweak over this year to finally get a final format that I'm really happy with. But it's a slow learning curve, you know, as you go, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's good to fail.
Absolutely.
Like I get a chance to really beat myself up, which I like. Like not like when I first started doing my other show, I'd be like, "Oh, this is trash. Don't listen to this." Like I was basically telling people not to listen to my show, which was a big mistake. But I was like, "No, this sucks. Maybe next week will be good."
I think there's something good about being self-deprecating.
Yeah.
Like I am anyway. I'm a self-deprecating person. Like not in a serious capacity, but I know what my foibles are. I can poke fun at myself, and I'm totally comfortable with that, and that's where you learn. I think if you can look at that like, oh shit, I fucked that one up, and laugh about it and then move on, oh, that's a good thing. You can grow from that. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to sit stagnant. And
do you get throat gurgles? You get those?
Especially if I'm drinking a beer or something. I
never knew that was like a thing before, like that was so audible. So I remember like just listening back and you hear, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, I edit a lot of weird ticks and noises and stuff. I notice a lot about things that people do and say, and just to buy them time, the cadence of their speech. So many so many ahs, likes, that, like, I do it all the time. I have to edit out 20 or 30 out of every 30-minute episode. It's like 1 a minute or something like that.
I developed a new one. I started rubbing my legs.
Oh, yeah?
Because I didn't know what to do with my hands sometimes while I'm talking. So I just start going like this. I just start rubbing my legs. I have to stop doing that now.
I sometimes do this, which luckily doesn't make any noise on the microphone. Yeah, I guess. I hadn't really thought about that, but...
And you're doing more video now stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to get some video components on the go. It's really cool when I have my buddy Matt, who's just getting into cinematography now. So it's a learning curve for him and me at the same time. So, but we're both getting something out of it, so it works. But if I don't, I just, have a one-shot camera pan on them, and which I'm content with for now. But that will only bide me over for so long.
Are you on camera too? Like when you?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't need this mug on the camera.
That was a hard thing too. Like when you start talking, like it's to a certain point, it's like vulnerable. Just to like, I'm important enough to listen, to me talk for like, the next 45 minutes. And put that out there. Like, what am I thinking? What's wrong with me?
I'm getting better with that.
Yeah.
I see the thing when I was on radio and podcast before, I would never listen to them after the fact, so it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
But now that I'm editing everything, that's all I hear is me, and I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm getting better with it, and I'll talk a little bit more in episodes, but a lot of the first episodes, I would barely talk at all, and then I would just let the guests, I would cut myself out as much as possible.
Yeah.
But now I'm okay with it now. It's not too bad.
An update for the podcast. I successfully bid on an Aztec
you got that
screaming or death screaming whistle. Whistle.
I was watching something and they had the death whistles in it the other day. Oh, what was it? Maybe it was actually a video you posted or something.
I definitely posted a video.
The guy standing there and he blew in it. Yeah, that's badass.
It's horrifying. So if you're in St. John and it sounds like three or four people just wailing, it's my whistle.
Yeah. Follow your ears and you'll find where Steve lives.
But that's something I want to do on the show. eBay. I have a bit of an issue with eBay where I'm always buying things on eBay and I'm like, oh, it's cheap, no big deal. So like I have all this like bizarre stuff coming through. After the whistle comes in, I'm just gonna have to delete eBay because it's gotten out of hand,
out of control.
Yeah, but I'm excited for that to be on the show. I'm hoping that picks up and registers on the mic.
That would be it probably would. I imagine it would. Yeah,
like I hope it's not like muffled or too piercing.
Yeah,
that's definitely gonna to make its way.
You'll have to do a couple takes in different distances just to get it right.
I know one time I did a video on Instagram, like just like an Instagram live.
Yeah,
and I had a hard time with that. Just like talking and like it was like, oh, what's my face?
Yeah, I can't. I'm not there yet. Maybe someday. Well, shit. Thanks for coming on, man.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that was great.
Hello, this is Ryan McIntyre, and you've been listening to the Pagan Place Podcast.